The rain hammered my windshield like angry fists as I pulled over to check my phone. 3 rides down, 2 more to go before I could call it a night. The storm had been building all evening, turning the city streets into rivers of black water that reflected my headlights in fractured patterns. Most drivers would have gone home by now, but rent was due tomorrow, and desperation makes you do stupid things. My phone buzzed. 4th ride request. Pickup, corner of Elm and 3rd. Destination, 1247, Mockingbird Lane. I squinted through the rain-soaked windshield. Elm and 3rd was in the old part of town, where streetlights were more suggestion than reality. But the fare was good, unusually good for such a short distance. I accepted the ride and pulled back into traffic. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge. Every few seconds, lightning split the sky, turning the world into a stark black and white photograph before plunging it back into darkness. The radio crackled with weather warnings, but I kept driving. I'd driven through worse storms than this, or so I told myself. Elm and 3rd turned out to be a deserted intersection surrounded by abandoned storefronts. Their broken windows stared at me like hollow eyes. I parked under the only working streetlight and waited. Engine running, heat blasting against the unseasonable cold that had crept into the night with the storm. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I checked my phone. The ride was still active, but there was something odd about it. The passenger's name showed as a string of symbols I couldn't read. Not letters, not numbers, just shapes that hurt to look at directly. I blinked and looked again. Now it read Morgan, clear as day. The rear door opened. I glanced in my rearview mirror as my passenger slid into the back seat. The overhead light should have illuminated them, but somehow the shadows seemed deeper, more absolute. All I could make out was a vague human shape and the soft drip of water onto my upholstery. "Sorry about that," came a voice from the darkness behind me. It was pleasant enough, neutral, carefully modulated. "Weather's terrible tonight." "No problem," I replied, pulling away from the curb. 1247, Mockingbird Lane, right? "That's correct." Something nagged at me as I drove. I've been doing rideshare for 3 years, and passengers always made some kind of small talk. They complained about the weather, asked about my night, told me about theirs. This one just sat in perfect silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't moving, not shifting in their seat, not adjusting their seatbelt, not even breathing loud enough for me to hear over the rain. "Been waiting long?" I asked, trying to fill the oppressive quiet. "Time works differently in weather like this," they replied. "Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like seconds." The GPS on my phone directed me through increasingly narrow streets. The familiar landmarks of the city fell away, replaced by neighborhoods I didn't recognize despite living here my entire life. The houses grew older, more decrepit, until they looked less like residences and more like monuments to decay. "You know," I said, glancing again at the rearview mirror, "I don't think I've ever been to Mockingbird Lane. Most people haven't." Lightning flashed, and for one brilliant second, I saw my passenger clearly in the mirror. They were pale, not just light-skinned, but genuinely colorless like old paper. Their clothes appeared to be from another era entirely, formal and old-fashioned. But it was their eyes that made my blood freeze. They were completely black, not just the iris, but the entire visible surface, as if they were holes cut directly into their skull. Thunder crashed overhead, and when my vision cleared, the reflection was gone. "Everything all right?" the voice asked from behind me. "Fine," I managed, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Just, this storm is really something." The GPS announced we were approaching our destination, but when I looked ahead, there was nothing. The street simply ended in a wall of darkness that my headlights couldn't penetrate. No houses, no numbers, no sign that Mockingbird Lane had ever existed. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, pulling over. "The address doesn't seem to—" "It's here," my passenger interrupted. "It's always been here." I turned around to argue and found the back seat empty. My heart hammered against my ribs as I grabbed my phone, illuminating the interior with its pale glow. The seats were dry. There were no wet marks, no indication that anyone had ever been in my car. But the ride was still active on my app, the destination unchanged, 1247 Mockingbird Lane. Then I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. According to the app, I'd been driving for over 6 hours. I checked the clock on my dashboard, 3:47 a.m. While I'd picked up my passenger, it had been 11:20 p.m. But the drive couldn't have taken more than 20 minutes. Time had somehow slipped away from me like water through my fingers. The passenger door opened again. This time, I didn't wait to see who or what got in. I slammed the car into drive and floored the accelerator, tires spinning on the wet asphalt as I fled back toward the city center. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the road, perfectly still, watching me go. I drove for what felt like hours, following street after street, but every turn seemed to lead me back to the same intersection, Elm and 3rd. The abandoned storefronts, the broken streetlight, the sense of watching eyes. My fuel gauge hadn't moved. My clock was frozen at 3:47. That's when I understood. I wasn't driving anymore. I was being driven. The steering wheel turned to my hands, guided by something else's will. The rain had become a cage, and I was trapped inside it with whatever had been wearing Morgan's name. The radio crackled to life, tuned to a station that shouldn't have existed. "Welcome to the night shift," announced a familiar voice, my passenger's voice, now coming from every speaker in the car. "Population, 1. Departure time, never." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The rain kept falling, and somewhere in the darkness behind me, something that had never been human began to laugh. My phone buzzed with a new ride request. Pickup, corner of Elm and 3rd. Destination, 1247 Mockingbird Lane. The ride I could never complete, would never complete, because some destinations exist only to collect drivers who work too late on stormy nights. And now I was part of the route, another ghost in a machine, waiting for the next desperate soul to accept a fare that would cost them everything. The rain hammered my windshield like angry fists, and I drove toward a pickup that would never end. The lights went out during the worst storm I had ever seen. Rain hit my apartment windows so hard it sounded like rocks being thrown at the glass. I sat in my living room with just a flashlight, watching the water run down the windows in thick streams. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. From my couch, I could see right into the apartments across the street. Most of the time, I try not to look. It felt wrong to watch people in their homes. But tonight was different. Tonight, the darkness made everything feel like a movie. I pointed my flashlight at the window and clicked it off and on. The light made bright circles on the wet glass. When lightning flashed, I could see the whole street for just a second. The empty building across from me looked scary in the quick white light. It had been empty for 2 years, ever since the fire. The windows were all boarded up with wood planks. Or so I thought. Mrs. Peterson lived in the apartment below mine. She was probably asleep already. She always went to bed early. To my left was Mr. Kim's place. I could see his TV glowing blue in the dark. He was watching late-night shows like he always did. I moved my flashlight beam across the street to look at the old building. Most of the windows were definitely covered with boards. But there was one window on the 2nd floor that looked different. The board had fallen off, or maybe someone had taken it down. The window was just a black square in the brick wall. Lightning flashed again. For that split second, I saw something in the dark window. A white shape. It looked like a person standing there, looking back at me. My heart started beating fast. I told myself it was just my brain playing tricks. Old buildings had lots of shadows. Maybe it was just a piece of cloth or paper hanging there. But I kept looking. I turned off my flashlight and waited. The rain kept hitting the windows. Thunder rolled across the sky like a big truck driving over my head. When the next lightning came, I looked hard at that window. The white shape was still there, and it looked like it had moved closer to the glass. I turned my flashlight back on and pointed it right at the window across the street. The beam wasn't strong enough to reach that far, but I tried anyway. All I could see was darkness in that empty window space. Then I had an idea. Maybe I could signal to whoever was over there. Maybe someone was stuck in the old building because of the storm. Maybe they needed help. I flashed my light 3 times. Long, short, long, like a code. I waited. Nothing happened. Then, in the window across the street, I saw a light flash back. 3 times. Long, short, long. My hand started shaking. That was impossible. The old building had no power. The city had turned it off after the fire. There were no working lights in there. I decided to test something. I flashed my light 5 times really fast. The light in the dark window flashed back 5 times really fast. My mouth went dry. I put down my flashlight and moved away from the window. This was too weird. Someone was definitely in that building, and they were copying everything I did. But who would be in there? And how did they have a light? I couldn't stop myself from looking. I went back to my window and picked up my flashlight. The storm was getting worse. The wind was so loud it sounded like screaming. I decided to try one more test. I would write a letter in the air with my flashlight. If someone was really there, they wouldn't be able to copy that perfectly. I wrote the letter H in the air with my light beam. It was sloppy, but clear enough. In the window across the street, a light started moving. It made the same shape, a perfect H. I wrote E. The light copied it exactly. I wrote L. The light did the same. I wrote P. The light made a P too. My whole body felt cold. Whoever was over there could see exactly what I was doing, even in the dark, even through the rain. They were copying my movements perfectly, like looking in a mirror. Then I realized something that made me feel sick. I had been flashing my light for almost an hour. The whole time, the person in the window had been watching me, not just copying my signals, watching everything I did. I moved away from the window again. I went to my kitchen and got a glass of water. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. When I came back to the living room, I couldn't help looking across the street. The white shape was still in the window, but now it looked bigger, closer. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on. I pointed it right at my own window so whoever was watching could see me clearly. Then I waved my hand back and forth in front of the light. In the window across the street, something waved back. But here's what made my blood turn to ice. The thing waving at me had too many fingers. Way too many. They moved like worms in the darkness. I ran to my bedroom and hid under the covers like a little kid. But I could still hear the rain hitting the windows. And I knew that thing was still watching. After a long time, I got brave enough to look out my bedroom window. It faced the same direction as my living room. From there, I could see the old building too. Every single window that wasn't boarded up had a white shape in it now. They were all looking at my building, looking at me. I closed my bedroom curtains and sat on my bed with my flashlight. But closing the curtains didn't help. I could feel them watching. Even through the cloth, even through the walls, I knew they could see me. The power came back on around 6 in the morning. The storm was finally ending. I looked out my living room window in the daylight. The old building across the street looked normal. All the windows were boarded up, just like always. There was no way anyone could have been inside, looking out. But there was something new. On the sidewalk in front of the building, written in white chalk, were 4 letters, Chielpi. The same letters I had written in the air with my flashlight. I moved out of that apartment the next week. I told my landlord I needed a place with no windows facing other buildings. He thought I was crazy, but I know what I saw that night. Some things live in empty places, and they watch us through the rain and darkness. They copy what we do because they want to learn how to be like us. The scary part is, I think they're getting better at it. Sometimes, on rainy nights in my new apartment, I still feel like something is watching me. But now I keep all my curtains closed, and I never, ever flash lights at windows. Because some things in the dark should never be invited to copy you. I took the night job at Miller's Crossing because nobody else wanted it. The pay was good, but the work was lonely. All I had to do was sit in my little guardhouse and watch for trains. When one came, I would turn on the red lights and lower the gates to stop cars from crossing the tracks. Most nights were quiet. Maybe 3 or 4 trains would come through between midnight and dawn. I would read books, drink coffee, and listen to the radio. It was boring, but boring was good. Boring meant safe. The crossing was 5 miles outside town, surrounded by empty fields and old trees. During the day, you could see for miles in every direction. But at night, the darkness swallowed everything beyond my small circle of light. It was on a night in October when the rain started that I first saw the ghost train. The storm came in fast and mean. Rain hit my guardhouse like bullets. The wind made the whole building shake. I had to turn my radio up loud just to hear it over the noise. Around 2 in the morning, my warning system started beeping. A train was coming from the east. I looked at my schedule book, but there was no train supposed to come until 4:30. Sometimes trains ran early, so I didn't think much about it. I flipped the switch to turn on the warning lights and lower the gates. The red lights flashed through the rain. I stepped outside to watch for the train, pulling my coat tight against the cold wind. The train whistle blew long and sad in the distance. But something was wrong with the sound. It was too hollow, like it was coming from very far away, even though the train should have been close. Then I saw the light. Train headlights always look bright and white. This light was different. It was pale yellow, like an old candle, and it flickered as it moved through the rain. The train came into view, and my blood turned cold. It was old, really old. The engine looked like something from 100 years ago, with a big smokestack puffing out black smoke. The passenger cars behind it were the kind with wooden sides and small windows. But the strangest thing was how quiet it was. I could barely hear it over the rain, even though it was huge and heavy. As it passed through the crossing, I looked in the windows of the passenger cars. They were full of people, but the people looked wrong. They sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Their faces were pale white, and their clothes looked old-fashioned. Some of the women wore long dresses and hats with feathers. The men had suits with high collars and pocket watches. None of them moved. None of them blinked. They just stared ahead with empty, dark eyes. The train passed through and disappeared into the night. I stood there in the rain for a long time, trying to understand what I had seen. When I finally went back inside, I checked my logbook. There was no record of any train coming through at that time. I called the train company the next morning. They said no trains had used that track during my shift. They thought I was making it up or maybe fell asleep and had a dream. But I knew what I saw. The ghost train came back the next stormy night. And the night after that. Always during bad weather. Always with the same pale light and silent movement. Every time, the passenger cars were full of those still, staring people. I started doing research at the library in town. I found old newspaper stories about a terrible train accident that happened at Miller's Crossing in 1923. A passenger train had been caught in a flash flood during a bad storm. The water washed out the tracks, and the train crashed into the creek. Everyone on board died. 47 people. The newspaper had pictures of the victims. They looked exactly like the people I saw in the windows of the ghost train. I thought about quitting my job, but I needed the money. So I decided to just ignore the ghost train when it came. I would stay inside my guardhouse and not look. What I couldn't see couldn't hurt me. That worked for a few weeks. But then something changed. One rainy night in November, the ghost train didn't just pass through. It stopped. I was inside my guardhouse, trying not to look out the window when I heard the train whistle. But this time it kept blowing over and over. Long, sad calls that seemed to be calling for something. I couldn't help myself. I looked outside. The ghost train was stopped right at the crossing. The pale yellow light from its engine lit up the rain, and all the passengers were looking at me. Their white faces were pressed against the windows, and their dark eyes were staring right at my guardhouse. Then I heard knocking on my door. I sat frozen in my chair. The knocking came again, slow and steady. When I didn't answer, a voice called out. "Guard," it said. The voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "We need to talk." I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The storm was too bad to drive in, and the next town was 20 miles away. "What do you want?" I called through the door. "You haven't been doing your job," the voice said. "Every time we come through, you hide. A crossing guard is supposed to watch the crossing." I turn on the lights," I said. "I lower the gates." "That's not enough. You're supposed to witness our passage. We've been riding this track for 100 years, waiting for someone to see us properly, to acknowledge that we're still here." I press my back against the wall. "I see you. I know you're there, but you hide from us. You refuse to do your duty." The knocking stopped. For a moment, I thought they'd gone away. Then I heard footsteps walking around my guardhouse. Slow, wet footsteps in the mud. "If you won't watch for us," the voice said, now coming from a different side of the building, "then maybe you should join us. Dead guards don't hide from their responsibilities." I looked out the window and saw them. The passengers from the train were standing in the rain around my guardhouse. Their old-fashioned clothes were soaked, but they didn't seem to care. Water dripped from their pale faces, but their eyes never blinked. "Please," I said. "I'll do better. I'll watch. I promise." "Promises aren't enough," said the voice. "Prove it." The footsteps moved away. I heard the train whistle blow once, and when I looked outside again, the ghost train was gone. So were the passengers. But I knew they would be back. Now, every stormy night, I stand outside my guardhouse and watch for the ghost train. When it comes, I salute as it passes. I wave to the passengers in the windows. I do my job properly, the way a crossing guard should, because I learned something important that night. Some duties last forever, even after death. And some jobs are more dangerous to quit than to keep. The dead passengers wave back at me now. Sometimes they even smile. And as long as I keep watching, as long as I do my job, they leave me alone. But I know that if I ever stop, if I ever hide again, they'll come back for me. And next time, I'll be riding with them on their endless journey through the storm. I should have left when the first flood warning came on the radio. But I was broke, and my basement apartment was cheap. I thought I could wait it out. The building was old, but it had survived other storms. How bad could this one be? Pretty bad, it turned out. The rain started on Tuesday and didn't stop. By Thursday night, water was coming up through the drains in my bathroom. By Friday morning, it was ankle deep all through my apartment. The power was still on, so I moved my important stuff to high shelves and waited for the water to go down. It didn't go down. It kept rising. My apartment was in the basement of a brick building that was over 100 years old. The landlord had split it into 4 small apartments. Mine was the cheapest because it got damp sometimes. But I had never seen anything like this. By Friday night, the water was up to my knees. I called the landlord, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I called the city, but all the lines were busy. I was on my own. I climbed up on my kitchen table and tried to think. The water was brown and smelled terrible. Things floated in it that I didn't want to look at too closely. My TV was already underwater. My bed was soaked. But the worst part wasn't the rising water. It was what came with it. The first memory hit me around midnight. I was sitting on my table, eating crackers from a box I'd saved, when suddenly I wasn't me anymore. I was someone else. A woman named Betty who lived in apartment 2B back in 1967. She was old and sick, and when her heart stopped working, she fell down on her kitchen floor and couldn't get up. I felt everything Betty felt as she died. The pain in her chest, the fear, the way she called for help, but nobody came. She lay on that floor for 3 days before anyone found her. Then, just like that, I was myself again, sitting on my table in the flood water, shaking and scared. But I remember being Betty. I remember dying as Betty. The water kept rising. More memories came. I became Tommy, age 7, who lived in the building in 1943. He had been playing in the basement when a pipe burst and filled the room with scalding hot water. He couldn't reach the door in time. I felt his skin burning. I felt him drowning in pain and steam. I became Mrs. Chun, who had a heart attack on the stairs in 1978. She tumbled down 2 flights and broke her neck. I felt every bone snap. I became Jake the maintenance man, who got electrocuted fixing the wiring in 1989. The shock went through my whole body like fire. Each time, I died their death. I felt their last moments as if they were my own. And each time, when it was over, I was back in my flooded apartment, gasping and crying. The water was up to my chest now, and I had to move to my kitchen counter. But being higher up didn't help. The memories kept coming faster. I learned that my building was built on top of an old cemetery. In 1889, they had moved all the bodies to make room for new construction. But they didn't move the memories. Those stayed in the ground, deep under the foundation. Now the flood was bringing them all up. I became Maria, who died of a fever in 1952. I became Old Pete, who fell down the basement stairs in 1961. I became Lisa, who took too many pills in 1983. Each death was different, but they all ended the same way, with darkness and fear and the feeling of being forgotten. But the worst was yet to come. The water reached the ceiling around 3 in the morning. I had to push my face up against the ceiling tiles to breathe. That's when I realized I was going to die too. I was going to drown in this basement, just like some of the others had. And that's when the final memory hit me. I became myself, but not the me sitting in the flood water. I became the me that was about to die. I felt the water fill my lungs. I felt my heart stop beating. I felt my last thoughts. How scared I was, how I didn't want to die alone, how I wish someone would remember me. But here's the really scary part. Even though I was living through my own death, I wasn't dead yet. The water was still just touching the ceiling. I still had maybe 10 minutes of air left. I was seeing my own future. The flood was showing me how I was going to die. That's when I understood what was really happening. The building wasn't just full of memories of people who had died. It was full of memories of people who were going to die. Past and future all mixed together in the floodwater. I saw myself drowning over and over. Different ways, different times, but always drowning. In some memories, I died quietly. In others, I fought and screamed. But I always died, except in one memory. In that one, I found a way out. I saw myself punching through the ceiling tiles above my head. I saw myself climbing up into the apartment above mine. Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived there, had gone to stay with her daughter when the flood warning started. Her apartment was empty, but it was above the water line. In the memory, I lived, so I did what I'd seen myself do. I punched through the wet ceiling tiles. They crumbled easily. I pulled myself up through the hole and into Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. The floor was dry. The air was sweet and clean. I sat on her couch and cried for a long time. Not just because I was safe, but because of all the deaths I had experienced. All those people who had died in this building over the years. All their fear and pain was now part of me. The flood went down 2 days later. My apartment was destroyed, but I was alive. I moved out as soon as I could, but I never forgot what I learned in that basement. Buildings remember everything that happens in them. Every birth, every death, every moment of joy and terror. It's all stored in the walls and floors, waiting for the right moment to come back up. Most of the time, those memories stay buried. But when something big happens, like a flood, they rise to the surface. And if you're unlucky enough to be there when they do, you become part of them. I still have nightmares about the people who died in that building. But the worst nightmares are about the me I saw drowning in the floodwater. Because even though I escaped, somewhere in the memory of that building, there's a version of me that didn't make it out. And on rainy nights, when I hear water dripping, I sometimes wonder if that drowned version of me is still down there in the basement, living through the flood over and over again. Some memories never die. They just wait in the dark, under the water, for someone new to share them with. I loved working alone at the weather station. The job was perfect for me. I got to watch storms, track wind patterns, and send reports to the main office in the city. Most people would have felt lonely in the small building on top of Miller's Hill, but I enjoyed the quiet. The station had been there for 50 years. It was just one room with big windows on all sides, full of weather equipment and computers. During the day, I could see for miles in every direction. At night, I could watch lightning flash across the sky like fireworks. My job was simple. Every hour, I checked the temperature, wind speed, and air pressure. I wrote down how much rain had fallen. Then I sent all the information to headquarters using my radio. It was good work until the night the readings started going crazy. The storm had been building all week. By Thursday evening, the wind was howling around my little building like a wild animal. Rain hit the windows so hard I thought they might break. I had seen bad storms before, but this one felt different. Angry. Around 10 o'clock, I was checking my instruments when something strange happened. My computer screen started showing weather data from places that shouldn't exist. The first weird reading came from a place called Millfield Station. According to my computer, it was 20 miles north of my location. But I knew every weather station in the area, and there was no Millfield Station. There was nothing 20 miles north but empty forest. The reading said Millfield Station was reporting a temperature of 32 degrees and heavy snow. But it was October, and the temperature outside my building was 65 degrees with rain. I thought it was just a computer error. Old equipment sometimes picked up signals from far away. Maybe I was getting data from a station in another state. But then more impossible readings started coming in. Pine Valley Weather Post was reporting a tornado. Riverside Station said the temperature was 110 degrees. Clearwater Base was tracking a blizzard. None of these places existed. I had maps of every weather station for 200 miles. These names weren't on any of them. I tried calling my supervisor, but the phone lines were down because of the storm. My radio wasn't working either. Too much interference from the lightning. So I decided to investigate on my own. I looked up the locations my computer was showing. According to the readings, Pine Valley Weather Post was 15 miles east of me. But when I checked my maps, there was supposed to be a lake there. Riverside Station was in the middle of what should have been a shopping mall. That's when I started to get scared. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside to check my equipment. Maybe lightning had damaged something. The wind was so strong it almost knocked me over. Rain soaked through my jacket in seconds. All my instruments looked normal. The wind meter was spinning. The rain gauge was filling up. The temperature sensor was dry under its little shelter. But when I went back inside, my computer was showing even more impossible stations. Oakwood Weather Center was reporting hail the size of baseballs. Sunset Ridge Station said the wind was blowing at 200 miles per hour. Valley View Base was tracking 3 tornadoes at the same time, and they were all getting closer to my location. I sat down at my desk and tried to think. Maybe the storm was so big that it was affecting my equipment in weird ways. Maybe the lightning was making my computer pick up old data from somewhere. But then I noticed something that made my blood turn cold. Next to each station name was a date. Not today's date. Old dates. Millfield Station was dated March 15th, 1987. Pine Valley Weather Post was dated June 3rd, 1962. Riverside Station was dated October 18th, 1934. My hand started shaking as I looked through all the readings. Every single impossible weather station had a date from the past. Some were from last year. Some were from 50 years ago. But the dates weren't random. They all had something in common. They were all dates when terrible storms had hit this area. I remembered the big tornado in 1987. It had destroyed a whole town 20 miles north of here. The town was called Millfield, and they used to have a weather station there. But the tornado wiped out everything. Nothing was left. The heat wave in 1962 had killed dozens of people in Pine Valley. The blizzard in 1934 had buried Riverside under 20 feet of snow. All these places had existed once. All of them had weather stations, but they were all gone now, destroyed by the very storms they had been trying to track. So why was my computer still getting readings from them? I tried to turn off my equipment, but it wouldn't shut down. The screens kept showing more and more stations. Hundreds of them now, all with dates from the past. All from places that had been destroyed by bad weather. That's when I realized what was happening. The storms never really ended. When a big storm destroyed a town, part of that storm stayed behind. It kept going, kept spinning, kept tracking the weather forever. And the weather stations that got destroyed kept sending out their last readings over and over again. My little station on Miller's Hill was picking up all of them. Every storm that had ever hit this area was still out there, still reporting back. But there was something else, something worse. I started seeing readings from stations I recognized. Current stations, places that were supposed to still exist. Downtown Weather Center was reporting that its building was on fire. But I knew that station. It was in the city, and it was fine the last time I talked to them. County Airport Station said it was underwater. But the airport was on high ground. It never flooded. University Weather Lab was reporting that all its equipment had been destroyed by hail. These readings had dates too, but not from the past. They were from tomorrow. My computer was showing me what was going to happen to other weather stations. This storm wasn't just big. It was going to destroy everything in its path. And somehow, my equipment was picking up the final transmissions these places would send before they were wiped out. That's when I understood why my station was getting all these readings. It wasn't an accident. My little building on Miller's Hill was special. It was the last station left, the only one high enough and strong enough to survive every storm. My job wasn't just to track the weather. It was to collect the final words of every weather station that had ever been destroyed. I was the keeper of their last messages. But now I was seeing something new on my screens. Something that made me want to run away and never come back. Miller's Hill weather station was starting to show up in the readings. My own station, my own equipment, sending out a final transmission dated exactly 1 hour from now. The message was simple: equipment destroyed, building collapsed, no survivors. I looked out my windows at the storm. The wind was getting stronger. The rain was coming down harder. Lightning was hitting the ground all around my hill. I tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start. The phone was still dead. The radio wasn't working. So I sit here now, writing this down, watching my own death approach on the computer screen. In 30 minutes, according to the readings, this storm will destroy my station. It will destroy me too. But that's okay, because I finally understand my real job. Someone has to witness the storms. Someone has to collect all the final messages. Someone has to remember all the places that got wiped away. And when my station gets destroyed, someone else will pick up my signal. Someone else will hear my last transmission and add it to the collection. The storms never really end. They just keep growing, keep collecting voices from all the places they've touched. And now I'm going to become part of that eternal storm, broadcasting forever from a station that no longer exists.